All right, this is part 2 of mastering brushes in Photoshop. I love the brush tool. I use it for all kinds of stuff, from retouching to removing stuff from the background to adding special effects, glow, and cool just overlays and VFX to my composites. So I love the brush tool. I use it for all kinds of stuff. So let's start with the basics. Let's talk about some keyboard shortcuts you need to know and you need to use to speed up your workflow so you can use the brush tool faster and more efficiently. First of all, the letter B. B is for brush, right? If you're on any other tool, if you press B, it'll go right to your brush tool. Now, next is letter D. Will reset your foreground and background colors to black and white. Black on top, white in back. If you press X, it'll invert them. If I keep pressing X, it keeps swapping them back and forth. I have my color panel open over here to easily grab colors and shades. You can view that by going to Window and Color, or also pressing F6. And I have it over here docked into a group of tabs, which I can shuffle through, but I'm going to have my color one on top. Now, to make this easier on my eyes and probably yours, I'm going to invert this to a black canvas and use a white brush. So press Control-I to invert your selected background layer, or Command-I on Mac. Now remember, the color that's on top is always the color of our brush. So if you see red on top, that's the color of your brush. But I'm going to do white. So press D and then X. There we go. Now, if you right click, it brings up the brush menu. You also have controls over here, but honestly, this is just a pain to click on. I like to right click. So right now with the basic, super basic default brush, the round brush for Photoshop selected, we have two basic controls here. We've got size in pixels and the hardness. So size is just what it sounds like, right? The thickness, the size of the round. And then hardness is how hard the edge is. If we have hardness to 0, the edge is not hard, it is soft. So it's a soft, kind of a blurred edge, right? But we also have some other controls you may not have known about. This is called the roundness, not to be confused with hardness, but if we squeeze it, it's no longer a circle. We can paint like a dash or a skinny dash based on how round we have it set. I'm going to put this pretty large. We also have angle, so I can change the angle. I can make a cool crisscross lens flare like that. And if you hold shift, it'll snap in, I think, 15-degree increments. So you can get exact angles like so, 90 degrees. Awesome. Okay. So those are the 4 controls of your brush: size, hardness, roundness, and angle. Now, not all brushes have the hardness. In fact, as far as I know, only this round brush that's built into Photoshop has this hardness control. The other ones don't. It's just the brush is basically an image stamp, and you can't control this blur effect. But on this default brush, you do have hardness control. Okay, now let's take this to the next level and open up our brush controls or brush settings panel, which is F5. I'm going to size this pretty large over here so you can really see what all's going on over here. Now, over here, I see all the thinels for every single brush that I have loaded, even though I have them organized into these folders, right, which is part 1 of my video series here. It shows them all here. Now, over here to the left of all these thumbnails, we have a whole bunch of little options here that we can check or uncheck. We've got shape dynamics, scattering, texture, and a bunch of others, and these will basically bring our boring brushes to life. I'm going to erase everything here, actually by using a really large brush set to black. There we go, 1 click. I just brushed it all to black. Okay, go back to our white color, and I'm going to size it down. Here we go. Now, the first thing to understand in the brush tip shape, which is that very first page, if you will, we've got all the basic stuff we already talked about: size, angle, hardness, roundness, and now we have spacing. So if I draw a straight line here, you can see that it's a solid line, right? Wrong. It's actually a bunch of dots really close to each other. You can tell by increasing your spacing setting. Now we can see it's actually just a bunch of dots repeating. So if we have our repeat down to like 1%, it's imperceptible, right? It looks like a solid dashed line. And for all intents and purposes, it is, but it's actually controlled by spacing. So we can space out each instance of this brush creation, right? It's spawning a brush every percentage. I guess that's based on the overall size of the brush. It's kind of relative. Let's go to the next page here, shape dynamics. Now we have something really fun, size jitter. Let's turn it all the way up and see what happens. Cool. As I paint, the size is jittering, which means randomly changing up and down from what it is already, which is, that, going all the way down and up. So when it's at 100%, the brush will never get larger than my brush size, but it will always and randomly get smaller. So it kind of starts at your brush setting and goes down to 0 and back up and jitters all around randomly. So this is really fun if you want a lot of randomization, like little planets or ink blots, blood drops, something like that. You could probably achieve that. Moving on down, we have control. So this is basically what's controlling the size. We can set this fade to the number 50 and watch as we keep painting, it's eventually going to run out. I'm still painting and it went down to nothing. Let's put our number a little bit smaller, 20. Painting, painting, I'm holding, and it stopped. So it's kind of like not a timer, but it's measuring your distance. I don't exactly know how, but let's put this size down to 0. We can see a little bit better. As I continue to paint, look, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it goes to the 0 point. If we put a larger number, it's going to last a lot longer. So I'm painting, it's slowly getting, that's pretty cool. You can get the illusion of a distance with that trick. But if you put your fade to a very small number, it's going to fade out much faster. See, I only got like 2 lines in. Okay, so that's our control. Now you can connect this to pin pressure, tilt, and your stylus wheel. If you have a finger pin stylus, you can control that, which is awesome. I normally leave this as off though. Next is we have angle. Remember, angle is your rotation. So nothing's really happening yet because this is a perfect circle. So if we right click and change this to a little slat, there we go. Now we can see the angle is now jittering. It's random angles. Here's a cool trick. If you do control for your angle jitter to the, direction, and let's put the jitter to 0. So we don't want random angles, but what will control the angle is our direction of our painting. So I'm painting, then I'm going to change my angle. Look at that. It's following the angle at which I paint. That's pretty cool. That can mimic a lot of brush and pencil type stuff. Yeah, there you go. And there's other things too. There's initial direction. So I guess what direction you started at. I'm going to go upwards, right? Up. So they're kind of stuck at that angle. I'm going to go slight to the right. Yeah, they stay at that angle. Interesting. Never used that before, honestly. Rotation, I don't know what that does. Probably some kind of control thing. So yeah, lots of control there. Let's turn that back to off. And of course we have roundness jitter. So this will make it, let's put our roundness back to full circle. There we go. So now the roundness, which is what we had set really thin, is random. Some are full circle, some are squished. If we randomize the angle and the roundness, now we get some that are skinny, some that are thick. And you can now also randomize your size. So here we have 3 dimensions of randomness: the size of the brush, the roundness, and the angle. Pretty cool. That's only the first page. Probably the most popular one, but let's go on to the next one, scattering. Scattering will, just like it sounds, scatter your brush around even though you paint in a straight line. So I'm going to size my brush down and also make them a little bit closer to each other so you can really see the scatter effects. Yeah, I'm painting straight downwards, but it is scattering them based on these settings. Let's go to scattering. There we go. So we've got size 1000%, 500%, 50%. Cool. The key to realism, especially for copying painting and art and stuff, is to not have perfection anywhere. There's got to be little mistakes and irregularities. So that's a great way to introduce some natural scatter. We can also increase the count number, which basically just makes it copy a lot more and scatter more. So yeah, it's a lot denser. Whereas if we turn it down to 5, turn it down to 2, yeah, I'll just keep it at 0. Pretty interesting stuff. Next is texture. So I'm going to go back to painting just a normal solid. Put my spacing really low, like down below 10%. You can't tell, right? It's pretty much a solid line. So in texture, we can actually load a texture here. Let's do, what is this crazy looking yellow thing? And I'm going to play with these settings here. Looks like if I turn down my depth down to almost 0, I can actually see the pattern, or in this case, it's calling it a texture, overlaid over wherever I brush. There's different modes here, like overlay, multiply is probably going to make it darker. No? I had it on height, whatever that means. Interesting. Yeah, I've never used this tool per se. Look, you can control the brightness of your texture. Now, if you have a nice scratchy texture, this would probably look better than trees, right? I don't have any textures preloaded like that, but pretty neat. Next page here is called dual brush. This will actually combine, and I think it's like layering brush A with brush B, which is selected here. So if I right click, I've got my soft, not hard brush, which with dual brush turned off looks like this, as we would expect. But if we turn it on and select a brush that maybe has some texture and shape to it, it looks like this. So it's softer on the edges like brush A, but it's rough like brush B. Let's try some Sci-fi circles? Oh, I don't know what is happening. I don't use this feature. That is trippy. Very, very interesting. Color dynamics is really fun. You can have random colors. So let's give it a solid color like red, which looks like this. But if we turn on jitter, it's going to bounce between foreground and background. So let's give it a background of blue. Ooh, interesting. We can have, let's turn that back to 0. Let's do hue jitter. So now around the color wheel, it's randomly grabbing a new color. We can also randomize saturation and brightness. So all kinds of things. We got random color, random brightness, and random saturation. Transfer page has to do with opacity. So if we turn up opacity jitter, it's randomly grabbing a different opacity, which is basically how transparent or not transparent your brush is. Now, other than randomly jittering the opacity amount, which you have this little preview down here you can see, in case you didn't notice, we do have other controls like fade, which will make, let's put random to 0. Let's put minimum to 0. So it's going to fade to a 0. All right, now we do have some additional pages down here that really, I mean, you can explore these on your own. There's brush pose, which, you know, does like tilting and rotating and stuff. That doesn't matter with this brush because it's already a circle. Wet edges, which does like this effect of kind of being denser around the edge. Build up, you know, again, this is like a brush thing for painting brushes. Smoothing and protect texture. I don't use these. So explore those when you have time, but they're kind of, you know, like niche stuff. So let's go to a nicely made professional preset that I got from adobe.com. Kyle's painting brush. He's got tons of awesome stuff. Let's go to charcoal. Let's do this one. So what does this one look like? Let's make it white and large. Cool, nice and scratchy. Now, when we access that preset, look what happened. He already came through and turned all the stuff perfectly fine-tuned to how he wanted it to be. And there's a lot of nice settings here that just give it this unique look. And all of his presets, as I go through them, you can see they're all different settings. Let's go to a totally different set here. Yep, lots of scattering, there's texture layers, there's shape dynamics. All these have different presets that give a very unique look. That one has that cool rotation effect, see? So let's create a preset and let's save it, okay? And that'll be it for this video. So right click, I'm gonna go to my basic round brush, right? The soft brush. And let's, oh, I've got some settings here. Let's turn off these things and let's go to spacing. We're gonna make a fairy dust brush. So I'm gonna put my hardness in the middle, around 50%. So it's kind of an orb, right? A little bit soft edges around the edge. And we're going to turn our spacing up to around 300%, so it's got spacing. Next, we're going to go to shape dynamics and turn up size jitter. I'm going to leave my roundness down because I want this to stay as a perfect circle, like a little orby orb, okay? Let's go to scattering. Let's turn it up 400%, so it kind of jumps around as well. Gives us some extra randomization. I'm going to size my brush down quite a bit. There we go. That's a nice pixie dust brush. And I want it to scatter a little further out. So maybe go up like 600-700%. Yeah, nice. And if you wanted to be further apart from each other, turn up your spacing in that very first page. It's like 600%. Nice. So we can paint little fairy dust trails behind someone or something. Texture. No, I don't like texture because it uses flat patterns and I don't have any good ones, but I do like dual brush. So I'm going to add a brush in here that's kind of rough. Let's see what that looks like. Can't really see. Yeah, there we go. If I make it a large brush, I can see. It adds a nice imperfection. Unless you want it to be perfect little dots, dual brush adds a nice little fuzziness to it. So that's pretty cool. I'll leave that on. Now let's give it a color of bright yellow. And we're going to turn on color dynamics. And we're going to vary the hue just a little bit. So, oh, not that much. This is very sensitive. Let's go to like 6%. So some are yellow, some are orange. Cool. And maybe brightness jitter. Turn that up to 50%. 100%. Oh, it's going downwards because this is purely bright and it's going downwards into the darkness. So I guess that's okay. Maybe 50% jitter. Oh, keep your purity at 0% so it doesn't alter the color. Okay, that's looking pretty nice. Next is transfer. You put your opacity. Let's try 50% so that some of these orbs will be transparent and some not. That looks nice. It looks like dust, honestly. It's a good dust brush. That's pretty much it. Once we're happy with what the brush looks like, let's right click, go to the gear, and then new brush preset. And we got to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Fairy Dust. Fairy Dust. And I'm going to include that yellow color. You don't have to, but you can. Include tool settings. Obviously we want that, and capture brush size in preset. So the size I have it now is going to save that as well, which can still be altered later. Click OK. And there we go. And here it is at size 45 by default. It has the little brush icon, which means there's brush settings, which, all these pages we checked on and did tweaks to. And then this yellow square means that there's a color and it is yellow. So yeah, we can obviously change that color anytime we want. And that's how brush settings works and how to save your presets. And in part 1, we learned how to organize and control brushes. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some good tricks. Go forth and paint and do awesome stuff to your photos. If you have any questions or comments or things that I missed, comment down below. I would love to get some input from you guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and have a great week.